Welcome to the Deep Dive. We dig into sources you're curious about, pull out the key insights, and basically get you up to speed fast.
That's the idea.
So today we're jumping into a really interesting conversation with Aleks Svetski. It's from the Bitcoin podcast with Walker.
Right.
And our goal isn't just the nuts and bolts of Bitcoin economics. We want to explore his ideas on, well, virtue, society, the future. Bigger stuff.
Yeah, it's quite a mix. He touches on everything from, how Bitcoin might shift wealth and influence.
Creating a new kind of...
elite.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
But also dives into character, fairness versus equality, even things like beauty's role in society. It's broad.
And for you, the learner, listening in, we're aiming to break down these sometimes complex arguments, give you the core ideas, memorable bits, maybe some surprising facts, without the info overload.
Exactly. A shortcut to understanding his perspective.
Okay, so let's start with that first big idea. Svetski suggests Bitcoin holders could get, disproportionately wealthy, right?
Yeah.
And become influential, almost like a new aristocracy. That's his framing. But he immediately adds a big but.
Which is?
That this kind of economic power, it comes with duties, responsibilities. It's not just about having the money.
Okay, responsibilities, like what specifically? Is it talking taxes or?
It's more fundamental, I think. He really emphasizes the need for character and virtue to develop alongside the wealth. Without it, well, he worries it could turn negative.
Negative how?
He actually brings up Brock Pierce as an example, sort of illustrating wealth maybe without that corresponding depth of character. The implication is that money alone doesn't make you a force for good. It could even be the opposite.
Right, it just amplifies what's already there, maybe.
That seems to be his concern.
So for Svetski, fixing the money system with Bitcoin, that's not the end game.
No, more like step one, the foundation. If money's fixed, he thinks society can then maybe refocus on what he sees as higher pursuits.
Look at.
Things like family, nobility, not in the aristocratic sense, but like noble character excellence, virtue, all leading towards what he calls an ascended civilization.
Wow, okay, ascended civilization. That's ambitious.
It is. And, it bumps up against some other discussions happening, particularly on the new right, or however you want to term it.
How so?
Well, there's a bit of skepticism sometimes about focusing too much on financial fixes. Some argue that rebuilding institutions, family, community, that's primary, and finance is secondary. Svetski seems to be saying fix finance so that you can focus on the rest.
Interesting tension there. Now, he uses the term Bushido quite a bit. What's the connection?
Right. Bushido. For anyone unfamiliar, it's Japanese, basically means way of the warrior. It's a code, like think Western chivalry, but Japanese. A code of virtues, conduct, honor.
Okay, and that ties into his book, The Beto of Bitcoin.
Exactly. The book title plays on Bushido, and the origin is kind of neat. It apparently grew out of a podcast chat.
Really?
Yeah, they were talking about values emerging in the Bitcoin space and got inspired by the book Shogun, actually. And initially, the book idea was very much just about Bitcoin, but it evolved. It became, broader, looking at history, culture, civilization, and the virtues Svetski thinks are needed after Bitcoin succeeds, potentially.
So it's less a how-to Bitcoin guide and more a what happens next guide.
Precisely. The central question seems to be, okay, let's assume Bitcoiners win the economic game. What do they do then? Do they become, a parasitic class just enjoying the wealth? Or do they step up and become virtuous leaders?
That's a stark choice. And it seems to reflect a change in his own thinking, too. Didn't he used to be more purely optimistic about Bitcoin's effects on people?
He did. He's mentioned that he initially subscribed more to the idea that Bitcoin fixes people. Just by using it, people would become better somehow.
But not anymore. What changed?
Well, he observed, let's say, behaviors in the space that gave him pause. More focus on Lambos, as he puts it, and maybe some degenerate behavior. It made him question that automatic fixing process.
So seeing people get wealthy, but maybe not.
Bit better. Kinda, yeah. So his view now seems to be that Bitcoin might just be an amplifier. It magnifies your existing traits, good or bad.
Which makes the virtue part even more critical, in his view.
Exactly. If these people are going to potentially have a lot of influence, they need to consciously cultivate character. Yeah. That's the book's real aim, I think, to encourage that preparation.
Okay, this leads into another key distinction he makes.
Right.
Virtue versus morality. How does he separate those?
It's an important point for him. He sees morality as potentially relative, maybe tied to specific cultures or religions. What one group considers moral, another might not.
Right.
Virtue, though, he defines more as principles in action, things that are almost universally recognizable as good. like courage or compassion.
You give an example.
He uses a historical one, Saladin, during the Crusades. Saladin treated Richard the Lionheart's ailing father honorably, with respect and compassion, even though they were mortal enemies in a, holy war. For Svetski, that's virtue in action. Transcending the specific morality of the conflict or the different religions. It's a recognizable human good.
Right, that makes sense. And his book outlines specific virtues, 10 of them.
Yep, 10. The first 8 are drawn directly from Japanese Bushido. So you've got justice, courage, compassion, honor, integrity, respect, duty, and loyalty.
Okay. Standard Bushido. What are the other 2 he added?
He added excellence and responsibility.
Why those?
His reasoning is that they're particularly crucial for the task ahead, as he sees it, of rebuilding civilization. It's not just about maintaining personal honor. It's about actively building something better, striving for the best, and taking ownership.
It's interesting. You hear echoes of other codes of conduct in those, don't you? Like the Eagle Scout law or similar things. There's overlap.
Absolutely. Many traditions value these kinds of principles. The core message seems universal.
Yeah.
Just having resources, the capital isn't enough. You need character to wield it well.
Otherwise, it can just make things worse.
That's the risk he highlights. Capital without character can amplify negativity. So for Bitcoin to be a net positive for the world, the people involved need to cultivate this stuff.
He uses that analogy of Bitcoin being like a keystone, right?
Yeah, I like that one. It's crucial. It holds things together, maybe enables the structure. But it's not the whole building. You still need the other bricks, the design, the skilled builders, the virtuous people in this analogy.
Necessary, but not sufficient.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pivot slightly. He talks a lot about quality versus fairness. What's his take there?
He draws a sharp distinction. Fairness for him is about, say, rules of a game being applied equally. But that fairness will naturally lead to unequal outcomes because people have different skills, luck, effort.
Right. Like in a race, fair rules mean someone wins, someone loses.
Precisely. Whereas trying to force equal outcomes often requires unfair measures, he argues, like handicapping the fastest runner. It can stifle merit.
And he connects this push for equality to something deeper, something kind of negative.
Yeah, this is where it gets pretty pointed. He links the intense desire for enforced equality primarily to envy.
Envy, wow.
He draws on Nietzsche here, the idea that envy is a tool, maybe the tool of the weak or the resentful, to pull down the strong, the excellent, the successful.
And how does he see that playing out?
He suggests this envy can be sort of weaponized, maybe by what he calls a parasitic class, perhaps people who gain power by stirring up resentment. And this leads society to actually start denigrating good things.
Like what? What gets denigrated?
Beauty, excellence, strength, achievement. He gives examples like, well, the defacing of historical statues or the promotion of art that seems intentionally ugly or meaningless.
So he sees that as a symptom of envy trying to level everything down.
That seems to be his interpretation, yes. A revolt against anything aspirational or beautiful, driven by resentment of those who achieve or embody it. It's definitely a controversial view.
No kidding. And this ties into rejecting mediocrity.
Right, because if the goal becomes equality of outcome above all else, then striving for genuine excellence becomes problematic. It creates inequality. So the result can be pressure towards a mediocre middle ground.
Where nobody stands out too much.
Kind of. He even looks at the word excellent. Its roots meaning like to climb, to rise above, like climbing a mountain. It's inherently unequal challenging.
The opposite of a flat, level plane.
Exactly. Which he contrasts with, say, the communist ideal of a perfectly flat, equal society.
He uses architecture too, right, to illustrate this.
Yeah, the contrast between, say, imposing but often soul-crushing brutalist architecture in some former communist states versus intricate, beautiful historical architecture elsewhere. For him, the buildings reflect the underlying values, one aimed at pure function and equality, the other maybe aspiring to beauty and transcendence.
Okay, so lots of critique there.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier, he's also optimistic about America even.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix. He talks about a potential American Renaissance. He doesn't necessarily see the current struggles as the end, but maybe as a transition. He uses the Roman analogy, maybe moving from the Republic phase to an empire phase, though hopefully a more virtuous one.
What makes him optimistic? What factors does he see?
It's a confluence of things, I think. The potential of Bitcoin, obviously, but also a growing consciousness about health, lifestyle, rejecting degeneracy, maybe even shifts in political will, a desire for something stronger, more rooted.
But it all comes back to the people involved, especially the Bitcoin holders.
Absolutely critical. In his view, if this new era is to be positive, it needs virtuous leadership, people with both the means and the character.
So it's a call for good, strong, capable people to actually take responsibility. Not just complain, but lead.
That's exactly it. Fill the vacuum perhaps left by others who abdicated their duty. It really loops back to that core theme. You need the capital, yes, but you absolutely need the character alongside it.
To avoid repeating mistakes and actually build something lasting.
Build a better future for the next generations, yeah. That seems to be the ultimate goal behind all this focus on virtue.
Okay, so if we boil it down, the key insight from this deep dive into Svetski's thought is Bitcoin might be this huge opportunity, this powerful tool for change.
But whether that change is good or bad hinges massively on the people wielding that tool, on the Bitcoin holders themselves embracing virtue, responsibility, and character.
Accumulating wealth isn't enough. Cultivating yourself is just as, if not more, important for the future he envisions.
Couldn't have put it better. Which leads us to a final thought for you, the learner, to chew on.
Go for it.
Considering this potential future, this need for character alongside capital, which specific virtue, maybe from that list of 10, resonates most with you right now? And more importantly, what's one small concrete step you could take, maybe even today, to actively cultivate that virtue in your own life?
That's a great question to ponder. If these ideas sparked your interest and you want to go deeper into Svetski's perspective, you can check out bidoofbitcoin.com.
Definitely worth exploring if you found this discussion intriguing.
It's a challenging perspective for sure. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.